So when I was making my 9 Fingers Keen video, somebody mentioned in my comment section that I should have included a card in the deck, and they were entirely right. So this video is me making an entire commander deck around the thing I was supposed to put in 9 Fingers Keen. One of my favorite deck types in Magic the Gathering is Landfall, at least in Commander. I'm not the biggest fan of it outside of Commander, but I certainly enjoy ramping up to big dumb dudes when I am playing me some 4-player, let's all pretend we're all playing the same power level deck simulator. And, well, there is one deck type that everybody universally loves, and that is the Simic Advantage engine of doing absolutely nothing. And so let's go ahead and build a deck around that concept by summoning a giant blue bull. Bonny Pall Clear Cutter, well, you know, Paul Bundy, is a legendary giant scout creature with reach, and whenever it enters the battlefield, you summon Boo, a legendary blue ox creature with power and toughness equal to the lands we control. And whenever we attack, we get to draw a card and then put a land from our hand onto our battlefield, meaning every single time we swing, we get a growth spiral effect. Also should be noted that Boo here is really powerful. Like, just having access to a Malomomaro sorcerer without the trample, but in the command zone, is already pretty good. But it makes even more sense to have access to this separate from the commander. While we lose access to commander damage for the biggest brunt of our damage, we also end up being able to fly under the radar far easier because of this. Since we're not making a 21-21 Ox to one-shot people, we are trying to get it to just enough to be threatening amounts of damage, and that's about it. And, well, this can cause players to ignore us on a table. So, let's go ahead and get some of the weaknesses of the strategy out of the way. Obviously, it is a Voltron-y style strategy without the benefits of Voltron. While we do gain the extra defensive abilities of not having to pretend we're going to one-shot people with a creature that's never going to hit 40 damage, we do still have the issue where if our Ox is removed, we lose access to everything our deck is trying to do. Period. Things get really awkward for us, and nobody is really going to want to remove Bonny Pall Clear Cutter away from us, so we just kind of have to suck it up and deal with it, which is why we are going to be running a small blink engine in this deck. Let's go ahead and cover that weakness that we will run into by making sure that we can blink Bonny Pall up to reset our Ox in case it gets path to exiled or any other shenanigans. A Nephalia Smuggler will be able to repeatedly blink our creature. That way we'll always have access to it. This can also be used as a defensive spell or a way to reset things like Coiling Oracle or Farhaven Elf for advantage. Minwelder Swift Savior will also be able to reset these creatures over and over again. Then we have an Essence Flux, a 1-mana way to blink a creature, and then Illusionist Stratagem, Ghostly Flicker, and Displace, which will get 2 creatures at once. This way, creatures in our deck that have the ability to ramp for us will be able to be blinked alongside our commander, giving us ways to basically replace the card we're losing in casting Displace and Illusionist Stratagem. These cards are very powerful. They all work at instant speed. They have just a ton of uses. We can use them as defensive spells. We can use them as advantage generators. We can use them to recreate our Ox if it dies. There's all kinds of ways to abuse Blink in a deck like this. But remember, we are not a Blink deck. We just happen to have a small Blink sub-theme to protect us in case things go south. What we are, more than anything, is a landfall deck, and landfall needs one really important factor to end up working at all, and that is some way to close out the damn game. Because, let's be perfectly honest, Simic do-nothing engines are really annoying to deal with because it feels like they spend all the time in the world on their turns and then they don't actually win the game. So let's go ahead and talk about our win cons and big stuff. Obviously, we have our Boo, which is going to be able to keep punching people for big amounts of damage, but we also want some creatures that have trample that do the same thing. Multani Yavamaya's avatar has reach and trample. It has the same ability as Boo, getting 1/1 for every land we control and each one in our graveyard, and this is a very sticky creature. We can pay 2 mana to put it back into our hand from our graveyard if it happens to die. Let's also have a Malamo Maro Sorcerer, trample, and the same general effect, power and toughness equal to the number of lands we control. Then let's have another form of evasion, Jolriel Voice of Zalfir. This will allow us to animate lands into birds that will draw cards when they hit our opponents, and those bird lands will have power and toughness equal to the number of cards in our hand. Because our commander is allowing us to draw cards every time we swing, we should be able to have at least 5 or 6 cards in hand every time we swing with Jolriel, so we should always be able to have access to a big enough bird to put players on a clock. Then let's add in a Rampaging Brontodon, a trample 7/7 creature that gets 1/1 for every land we control, but only ever when it attacks. This means if we have 10 lands, we are swinging in with a 17/17 trampler. This is far more powerful than Malamo or even Boo, and can be considered one of our main win conditions if, unlike our commander, we could get to it very frequently. I'm not a big fan of running tutors, so this is going to be on you to draw it into your hand. Then we have a Hydra Broodmaster, another way to close out games in stupendous fashion. This card is a 7/7 for 6 that has Monstrosity X, which means we get to pay a green and double X, and then we get to make an XX green Hydra token where, well, they are going to be gigantic versions of the Hydra Broodmaster. So if we pay, say, 10 mana into the X, that will be, well, it'll be 11 mana total. That will mean that 5 power gets added to the Broodmaster, making him a 13/13. And then 5/5/5 green Hydra tokens will be made on top of that. We will end up having a huge amount of creatures able to do lots of damage. And this is a go tall and go wide strategy at the same time. None of these creatures have evasion, but it's very hard for players to make enough tokens to chump block this many Hydras before they eventually run out of resources. Always target the player who has the least amount of resources first before engaging in a mid-rangey grind fest with the last ones. Let's also add in more token strategies. Rampaging Baloth gives us landfall to make big 4/4 green beast tokens, and Doppelgang allows us to pay 2 mana and then triple X to make X copies of any permanents that we want. So if we pay 5 mana, we make 1 copy of a permanent, but if we pay 8 mana, we will make 2 copies of 2 permanents. We can use this to create really dumb board states. Like, I don't know, let's go ahead and spend, what would it be at that point, 11 mana? And let's create 3 copies of Rampaging Brontodon, 3 copies of Hydra Broodmaster, and, well, for fun's sake, let's make 3 copies of any of our lands just to make sure that we've got a little bit of extra oomph power. Now these Brontodons, which had 11 power, are now going to have 14 power because we have created more copies of lands. And of course, instead of these guys swinging in with, well, 21 power because it's 7 plus the 14 lands we control, we're not swinging in with 21 power anymore. We are swinging in with quadruple that because we created 3 copies of the Brontodon, meaning we will be swinging in not with 21 power, but with 84 power, a far more dangerous amount that all has trample. Doppelgang can turn okay board states into dangerously dangerous board states. Also, using Doppelgang on cards like Rampaging Baloths is hilarious. You get Baloth out on the board, and then you say, okay, cool, I can make 1/4/4 when I make a beast. Let me go ahead and create 3 copies of Baloth, and then let me make 3 copies of lands. Now, and let's go ahead and put another card in that will do very similarly, an Aggressive Biomancy. It doesn't create as many tokens, but the tokens we do create are allowed to fight creatures when they come out. So put Aggressive Biomancy on, say, a Rampaging Brontodon after it's already swung, and now you're going to have a crap ton of 7/7s fighting all of your opponent's favorite cards, and then, well, again, you can just punch your opponent with the Brontodons afterwards. And let's have a single piece of recursion, a Timeless Witness, so that we can get these cards back into our hand if need be. Though, as you are upgrading the deck, a Bal Again Recovery will most certainly go a very long way here. Now, I know this is normally the core strategy part of the deck, and we've only really talked about like 10 cards, but that's because the majority of this deck is going to be the ramp section. This is, of course, a landfall deck. So let's go ahead and try to make our way there. First, we have to talk about drawing cards so we can get to all the important pieces of our deck. We are going to be running an 8-card draw engine because we already have a 9th draw card in Jolriel, and of course the 10th one is our lovely commander. So each of these is going to benefit from lands in one way, shape, or form, with one exception, and that is Harmonize. Very basic, 4 mana, draw 3 cards. Honestly, I think Harmonize is a fantastic card for newer and budget players, as it just does a good job. Then we have Tatiova. Anytime we drop a land on the board, we gain a life and draw a card. Eureka Moment and Urban Evolution, which both draw 2 and 3 cards and then drop an additional land onto the battlefield. Seer's Sundial lets us pay 2 mana when we landfall to draw a card, and Tireless Tracker makes a clue whenever a land touches the battlefield, which of course we can sacrifice for 2 mana to draw a card. Then we have Hydroid Krasis, a way to spend a ton of the mana that we are creating to create a giant flying trampler that will also give us life and draw us a ton of cards. Then we have Nissa, Steward of Elements. She makes us pay X into her cost, but she has a +2 that lets us scry 2, letting us sculpt our draws. But the really cool thing about her is that her pay 0 ability lets us look at the top card of our library, and if it is a land card or a creature with mana value less than or equal to the number of loyalty counters on Nissa, we then get to put that card onto the battlefield. Our deck is comprised of 43 lands and 26 creatures, meaning that 70% of our deck are live hits for Nissa, Steward of Elements. This is a fantastic way to dig through our deck really quick. And of course, if you hit one of our 25 instants and sorceries, or the 2 artifacts, or the 3 enchantments, it's not the worst thing in the world. It's just a free draw at that point. Her ultimate lets you untap 2 lands and turn them into 5/5 elemental creatures with flying and haste until end of turn that are still lands. Now, while that may not be the strongest ability in the world, remember it does synergize with Jolriel. Jolriel says anytime our land creatures deal combat damage to a player, we get to draw a card. So in a world where we have Jolriel on the board, as well as Nissa, Steward of Elements, this is potentially a draw 3 ability for us. And this is a fantastic thing to do if we are out of cards in our hand and we want to mana dump down. We go ahead and say, hey, we got 1 card in hand. Our Jolriel will make a 1/1 flyer. Let's go ahead and pay 6 into Nissa by dumping all of our mana into her X. Let's make 2 elemental creatures, and now let's swing with these 3 creatures, and because they all have flying, they're very likely to land. We'll do 11 damage, and then we'll draw 3 cards, putting us back into a game that we were otherwise really not in anymore. Nissa, Steward of Elements is a fantastic card. She's just a little finagly to actually get working. And this is, of course, all with the added benefit that our commander will draw us a card every time we swing with our creatures, if our commander is out. Even that's whether or not we have Boo out on the board. So, all things considered, we should be able to have a pretty stable hand size throughout a game. Now we need to make sure that our opponents can't keep stable board states. We're going to be running an 8-card interaction package, lower than normal, but I want to focus really heavy on the landfall aspect of our deck. And as such, we even have landfall worked into some of our removal spells. Broken Bond blows up an artifact or an enchantment, and then also allows us to put a land onto the battlefield. Let's also put in a negate to, well, negate any non-creature spell, a Void Slime, as it is one of the few counter spells that can stop activated and triggered abilities, and a Decisive Denial. Our Creatures are very big, so the fact that this is a counter spell that can also be a fight spell will work really well for us. Let's have a Return to Nature in here, as it is a card that can not only get rid of artifacts or enchantments, but also get rid of things in graveyards at instant speed. Player casts a reanimation spell, cast Return to Nature in response, and watch the color drain out of their face. Let's put a Reclamation Sage in here as well to blow up artifacts or enchantments, and importantly, Reclamation Sage can be blinked with our blink spells, making it a great target for removing plenty of problematic cards off of a board. Then for the big mana that our deck is trying to go for, let's throw in a Curse of Swine to exile X target creatures. For every creature exiled this way, they'll make a green boar. We have plenty of mana. We can use this as a removal spell or just as a full-on board wipe. Then finally, Monstrous Onslaught, letting us deal X damage divided as we choose amongst any number of target creatures, where X is the greatest power among creatures we control as we cast the spell. Since we have so many creatures that benefit from having a ton of lands out, usually Monstrous Onslaught is going to have between 8 and 15 power in its repertoire, ready to be aimed at multiple creatures on the board. Use this to clear out a board filled with elves or mana dorks, get rid of a ton of tokens, or hit a couple of really high priority giant targets with big toughness values. Either way, Monstrous Vortex is going to be doing a lot of work for you. And that's not all. We also have board wipes to talk about. And, you know, it's surprising to me that most blue players are not running Phasing of Zhalfir. This card can blow up all creatures for 4 mana. This is identical in every conceivable way to just Wrath of Godding a board, with only one exception. The Phasing of Zhalfir does replace every creature that is destroyed with 2/2 black Phyrexian creature tokens. So this does have a negative side effect that it does not work if our opponents are playing heavy token decks. So just be really careful if you are encountering those. We can use the read ahead mechanic, so we can play this and immediately destroy all creatures, or we can play it on its level 1 or level 2 ability to put a clock on our opponents, which will then phase out any of our cards so they can be protected from the Phasing of Zhalfir. Then we have Ezre's Predation, which says for each creature, we will create a 4/4 green beast and fight all those creatures. Predation's a great board wipe that also gives us a board state to win on a subsequent turn. Then we have Consuming Tide, which lets every player choose one non-land permanent they control, and then put every other non-land permanent back into their hands. For 28 cents, it's really hard to go wrong with this Flood of Tears alternative. And that does it for our removal. That should be able to keep our opponent's boards clear enough while we try to present as the biggest asshole on the block. That said, let's talk about our mana, as that is the most important part of a deck like this. Because we're running a landfall deck, we're going to be running a 22-card ramp package. I know it's a giant amount of cards, but there is a good method to the madness. Because not only do we have big ramp spells, we have creatures that are just big on their own on top of that. So we have Ulvenwald Hydra, which has reach and, of course, gets us a land when it comes onto the battlefield, and its power and toughness are equal to the number of lands we control. Barbaros Ferris Brand also has power and toughness equal to the lands we control, and every time it attacks, we get to draw a card and put a land from our hand onto the battlefield. So it's doing the same thing as our commander. This is functionally a lieutenant for the deck. And then we have Beanstalk Giant, which has power and toughness equal to the lands we control and searches our library for a land when we cast it for 3. Lumbering World Wagon also has power equal to the number of lands we control, and when it enters the battlefield or attacks, we search our library for a basic land and throw it onto the battlefield. And another giant creature of ours is Arixmethes, the Slumbering Isle. When it enters the battlefield, it enters with 5 slumber counters and it enters tapped. Whenever we cast a spell, we remove a counter from it, and eventually it becomes a 12/12, but otherwise it is a land that taps for 2 mana. Then we have Jyoti, the Mog Ancient. Jyoti says whenever it enters the battlefield, we make a Dryad Arbor, a forest dryad land creature, and we also have the ability to give all creatures +X/+X, where X is his power anytime that we swing. So any of our monstrous hydras, any of the tokens from Rampaging Baloth, this also gives a little bit of extra oomph to things like Boo. It's just fantastic. And if you choose to move the deck into a more go wide strategy, GOT is a fantastic supplement to that strategy. Then we have our more generic ramp pieces. Explorer draws us a card and drops a land onto the board, as does Growth Spiral. Search for Tomorrow goes into our deck, grabs a basic land, puts it on the battlefield untapped, and we can also suspend it to play it on turn 1. Farhaven Elf searches for a land when it comes onto the battlefield. Coiling Oracle looks at the top card and grabs us a land, throws it on the battlefield, or draws us a card. Dance of the Tumbleweeds can be used to both ramp and also create a giant green elemental creature, which, as per usual, has power equal to the number of lands we control. Then we have Clifftop Lookout, which allows us to grab a land from the top of our deck, throw it onto the battlefield. Font of Fertility, which can be sacrificed to get us a land. Colony Heart Expedition, which gets 3 quest counters, then sacks to create a land, or get 2 lands out of the deck, rather. Spring Bloom Druid, which sacks a land to put 2 lands onto the battlefield. Wood Elves grabs a forest out of the deck, puts it on the battlefield untapped. Ranger's Path goes into the deck and grabs 2 forests and put them onto the battlefield. Planar Genesis looks at the top 4 cards of our library and puts a land onto the battlefield from them, or puts one of the cards in our hand. Rampant Growth grabs a basic land, throws it onto the battlefield, and Steve can sack himself to put a basic land onto the battlefield. And Zamone Quandrix Prodigy can be used to put additional lands onto the battlefield every turn, or to draw 2 cards every turn once we have 8 or more lands available. All things considered, all of these together should be able to make us have a big enough amount of lands to be a problem for our opponent. But we also need to make sure that we have the right kind of lands afterwards. So, a note, as you are upgrading this deck, make sure that you are only adding in lands that are typed and replacing all of our untyped lands with lands that are typed. And when I say a typed land, I mean lands like Tangled Islet. This is because as you are playing a landfall deck, you will notice that you can quickly run out of lands that are typed in your deck. So as much as this version of the deck is running Command Tower, Flooded Grove, Vine Glimmer Snarl, Overflowing Basin, Simic Growth Chamber, and Temple of Mystery, these are needed for the budget version of the deck to function so that you always have access to your different colors. We are also running 15 forests and we are running 9 islands. But once you start upgrading the deck, the Temple of the Mystery definitely should become a Surveil land. Vine Glimmer Snarl should definitely become a Breeding Pool. Overflowing Basin should definitely become a Rimewood Falls. And, well, you see where I'm going with this. All of these should become lands that have types, so that cards like Wood Elves can yank them out of the deck. As you start putting things like Nature's Lore in the deck, you can yank them out of the deck. If you start putting in too many lands that are not typed, then you will rapidly run out of searchable lands in your deck. And trust me, this problem will happen more often and more uncomfortably than you're ready for. The only lands out of these that you're going to want to keep are Simic Growth Chamber and Tangled Islet. Tangled Islet is, of course, a typed land, and Simic Growth Chamber can bounce itself to the hand, letting you have access to your landfall triggers late into the game, even if you run out of lands. So please be careful when using your Simic Growth Chamber. Then we're going to have the fetching lands of Evolving Wild, Terramorphic Expanse, and Escape Tunnel. They're all the same thing, fetching lands. Then we have the fetching lands that can ramp us, Blighted Woodland and Myriad Landscape. And then we have the fetching lands that can double as standard lands or as lands that can fetch the things out of our deck: Shire Terrace, Panorama, and the Promising Vein. A lot of times you're going to want to just sit these on the board as regular lands and wait until you get like Tatyova or something out to turn them into draw pieces after the fact. Then we have utility lands, an Ominous Cemetery, which can be sacked to get rid of a problematic creature, Pit of Offerings, which can be used to get rid of problematic cards in the graveyard, a Mosswort Bridge, which can be used to get free cast off the top of your deck, and a card that I very rarely run in decks, but in landfall, I think this card actually has some utility, a Temple of the False God. I know, horrible card. Thousands of people have done the math on why this card is bad, but in landfall specifically, I have found that Temple of the False God is very easy to get online, and it very rarely hurts you when you are running a ramp package as thick as we are running. We have 43 lands in the main deck, and we are running 22 ramp pieces, and 2 of our draw pieces put additional lands on the board, and our commander can put additional lands on the board as well. That means in total, our deck is running not 43 methods of getting mana on the board, but 68 methods of getting mana on the board. That means 67 out of our land pieces are always going to be live. Temple of the False Gods math works far better in our favor with that kind of setup. So I think this card is definitely worth a grab, especially since we can tutor it up with things like Ulvenwald Hydra when we already have all the lands we need, and it ends up working as double ramp for us. There, now that I've justified my terrible decisions, let's go ahead and move into how to play this deck. All right? Alrighty, I think any hand that has 2 ramp pieces is probably keepable in this deck. At least that's my opinion. So we have 2 ramp pieces and 2 lands, and then we have Arixmethes, which is a ramp piece as well. We have a board wipe, and we have Void Slime. I think this is perfectly reasonable to start out with. So let's draw our first card. There's the Temple of the False God. This is the exact scenario where Temple should be considered bad. So let's go ahead and play the Vine Glimmer Snarl, show you guys the island, and tap the Vine Glimmer Snarl to suspend the Search for Tomorrow and pass turn to our opponents. Moving into turn 2, we draw Jolreal Voice of Zhalfir. We move a time counter off of Search for Tomorrow. We get to play an island and then tap 1 and put the Font of Fertility out onto the board and pass on to our opponents. Then we go to our next turn. Search for Tomorrow will grab a forest out of the deck. We then get to tap 2, crack the Font of Fertility away in order to grab yet another land out of the deck. Let's go ahead and say it's another island. That's going to come down onto the battlefield tapped. And Temple of the False God, we get to play on turn 3, and we have 5 lands. Temple of the False God is actually online now. Surprisingly, we did get there with only 2 lands otherwise in our hand. So we move on to turn 4. Here's Malamamara Sorcerer. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 mana available to us right now. I need more cards in hand. I need more mana. So I think the correct move is to get Jolreal out onto the board. She's going to pop out, and she will animate our island, and our island will hit a player for 5, drawing us a card. Then we move on to turn 5. We have Essence Flux. Let's go ahead and do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's get our commander out on the board, and our commander is going to be able to spawn our Boo token. So there he is. Boom. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. He is a 6. No, he's not even 6. He's a 5/5 Ox. Boo is out on the board. Jolreal, see here, up to 1 target land you control becomes... So we can't do the animation this turn. Playing our commander stopped us from doing the animation. That's entirely fine. It's not the worst thing in the world. Let's go ahead and pass to our opponents. If a player is open, then we swing Jolreal at them and draw, but let's not pretend that that's going to always be the case. We draw. Here's a forest. We get to play the forest. Boom. Boo is a little bit itty bitty bit bigger. We have a hand of 7. Let's go ahead and do our combat step right now. Let's animate our forest that we just played, and Boo and our forest are going to swing. We are going to get a draw from Bonny Pall, making our forest an 8/8. Boo is not going to be able to get any bigger because we didn't draw a land. The forest will make face for 8, drawing us yet another card. And of course, there we go. Unfortunately, we don't get to play the extra land because the sequencing does not work here. So we move into main phase 2, and let's go ahead and pay 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Yeah, I think 6 is what we're gonna do. Let's put the Hydra Broodmaster out onto the battlefield. That Monstrous is going to be fantastic for us to have use of here in a minute, and we've already got our commander in a pretty okay spot, so I think that the thing that we're going to get rid of in our hand, honestly, let's get rid of Malamo. He's not super important to us in this exact moment. Pass to our opponents. We move into turn 7. We get to play a land per turn, and as of right now, we have a couple options. We can Monstrous the Hydra Broodmaster and make a fairly respectable board state as we do. But I think holding on to that in our back pocket is a little better, because at turn 7, we need to be creating a powerful play right now, not letting our opponents wait longer and longer and longer for powerful plays. So instead, what I think we're going to do is we're going to pay 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 is going to put Hydroid Krasis on the board, and that X is going to do a little bit of work. So paying 7, no, we're going to pay 8. There we go. Hydroid Krasis is going to come down as a 6/6. It'll gain us 3 life and draw us 3 cards. And no, we don't get to draw 3. We have to do it this way. Let's just make him a 4/4. It is technically a weaker board state than what we would have otherwise, but it is a stronger setup for what we need, because we are going to enter combat and we are going to animate this island, and the island is going to be able to swing along with the Hydra Broodmaster and Bow. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Bow is a 7/7. This means that our island is going to draw us a card and drop an island out. Bow is going to become an 8/8. There, Bow is swinging in a little stronger, and the island is going to swing in with 8 power, which is a little more, it's like just a tiny bit more damage than we would have had otherwise, which is not fantastic, but it is better than what we would have had. And we have Essence Flux in our hand. We can reset our commander if Bow gets killed. I doubt it's going to get killed at this stage of the game. Nobody's really that threatened by Bow at this exact moment. So, boom, these creatures make face. We get to draw a card because of Joriel. That's a Wood Elves. Fantastic card. Let's go ahead and get rid of some things in our hand. I think Arixmathes has to stay, because that's the thing we're playing here in a bit. We have enough cards to make Zimone pretty good, so it just depends on what our opponents have. If somebody feels like they're getting really, really powerful, then we need to be kind of careful. We don't have a land in hand, so I'm not super comfortable playing the Broken Bond yet. If a player has a Bolas's Citadel or something out, and that needs to be taken care of, obviously the Broken Bond needs to be played. So let's go ahead and assume that they do have that powerful card, and we are going to lose a Displace in so doing. And moving to the next turn, we get to play a Blighted Woodland, and that means Bow is a little bit bigger. Let's go ahead and tap 1, 2. Let's get Wood Elves out. Let's go into the deck. Let's grab a forest, put that out onto the battlefield untapped. That's going to make Bow even a little bit bigger. Blighted Woodland, should we use it right now is the question. 1, 2, 3, 4. That would be a Arixmathes. And then Blighted Woodland. So it comes down to if we want Joriel active or if we want Arixmathes active. I think getting Arixmathes out right now and then holding up Void Slime mana is the move. That gets Boo just a little bit bigger again, and then when we enter combat, we get to swing in with a 5/5, well, 6/6. We get to swing in with a 6/6. The Hydroid Krasis gets to swing, obviously. This is a very respectable amount of damage. 6, 10, 17. We are looking at 28 damage being aimed at a player. If they have blockers, they're in a good spot. If they don't have blockers, this is likely lethaling a player at this stage. And of course, once our land creature makes contact, we will get another card into our hand, keeping us at a 7-card hand. If our opponents do anything untoward, then we are going to Void Slime that play away. And then let's just go ahead and do turn 9 to show you what the monstrous play looks like. We get to play the forest. Hydra Broodmaster, we are going to monstrous it right now. So here is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We are paying 14 into the X. This is going to make the Hydra Broodmaster a 14/14. And then it is going to create 7/7 tokens. So this means that in terms of total damage we have available for us right now, obviously we can't use the Hydra Broodmaster's damage at this exact moment, but after playing that land, Boo is at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So Boo's 12/12. Our Joriel is making our land swing in for, I guess Boo is a 13-13 now. Our land is swinging in for 6. So that is 19 damage available here. With the Hydroid Krasis, that is going to be 23 damage available. With the Hydra Broodmaster, that is going to be 37 damage available. And that is with 28 damage in Hydras that are going to sit back. No, sorry, there are not 4 Hydras. I paid 7. Sorry, I lied about the number of Hydras we have. We are doing 29 plus, we're doing 49 damage in Hydras sitting here in the winds. We are eliminating one player. 100% this is eliminating one player. And these Hydras are sitting in the back end, ready to eliminate another player. If a board wipe happens to us, we are not in a terrible spot, as we have plenty of lands to rebuild everything that lets us reset Boo. Honestly, nothing on our board is so terribly important that we could not lose it. In the event of a board wipe, if that were to happen to us, then the move after that point, well, I threw away an island. That would definitely be kept. I don't know what I'm doing. But in the event of a board wipe, the move would be, let's pay 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Let's go ahead and get Bonny on the board. That would be our second spell cast for Arixmathes. Then, actually, no. Arixmathes has not seen any spells cast. I lied. Then we would do, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have 6 mana available still. And we have generated a Boo. So that is out here, and Boo is a 13-13. Let's play the Evolving Wilds and crack it just to go ahead and get that land out of the deck. Boom, there's an island coming into play tapped. Boo is now a 14-14. We can then do 1-2 and get Zamone onto the board while holding up 1, 2, 3, 4, while holding up a little bit of mana. You know what? They board wiped us. Let's go ahead and Phasing of Zhalfir, and let's put Bonny Pall under Phasing of Zhalfir. Now we have a ticking time bomb for our opponents. Our board was not super important, and while they're trying to build up their boards, they're going to have to either kill the Phasing of Zhalfir, or they're going to have to hold up their board states while a 14-14 Ox is punching them in the schnoggin over and over again. Meaning that on our next turns, we are literally just going to be using Zamone for rebuilding our hand, not for anything else, while not playing anything on our battlefield. Just building up a better hand state, playing things like Beanstalk, Giant, and holding it in reserve, holding on to Ghostly Flicker and all this fun stuff, playing things like Urban Evolution in order to get extra land drops and extra draws. But we are not trying to build a board state at this point. We are just trying to hit people with the Ox and then build the board state once the Phasing of Zhalfir has done its thing. Even if we hit the board wipe, we are still in a very, very stable position. But what would you do if you had a little bit of extra money to dump into a deck like this? If you're choosing to upgrade this deck, obviously cards like Cultivate and Kadama's Reach do a ton of work, alongside a Ramp All-Star of Sky Shroud Claim, being able to get 2 forests out of the deck onto the battlefield untapped. Let's also make sure we can play additional lands onto the battlefield even more often, because as you upgrade the deck, your draw power gets better, which means you need to be able to dump lands onto the battlefield quicker. Druid class does a fantastic job of this, along with Oracle of Moldiah and Azusa Lost But Seeking. And I mentioned the draw power gets better. That's because you're going to be able to add cards like Rishkar's Expertise, Uro, Titan of Nature's Wrath, and of course, AC Tyrant of Gyre Straits. All of these are going to be able to draw a crap ton of cards out of your deck. Let's also make sure that our win cons are a little more solid as we upgrade the deck. And Avenger of Zendikar is an all-star, and our blink spells work fantastically with not only protecting him, but giving him more oomph. Then we have Scoot Swarm, which is another way that landfall can easily get out of control. A Mossborn Hydra to make a single gigantic creature to clock our opponents in the noggin. And Green Sleeves Morrow Sorcerer, another wonderful way to spawn not only only a ton of tokens, but also give you a creature that is able to do a lot of work on her own, since she is going to be gigantic. Let's also add in an Ancient Green Warden to get more access to our lands that are in the graveyard. And speaking of lands going to the graveyard, let's put a Fabled Passage in the deck, as well as another fetch land. Actually, just shock lands and fetch lands just do more work in this deck than any other deck, so just go for those when you get the chance. Cultivator Colossus also is another way to just quickly get a giant creature that draws through the deck at rapid pace. Just, the thing is gigantic and fantastic. Please run it if you have not already. And Lotus Cobra, and of course every other card like Lotus Cobra, so Tireless Tracker, Nissa, all of those will be fantastic as well, because they allow you to extend your turns really, really far. Finally, let's go ahead and make sure that Boo has all the power humanly possible by throwing in Ashaya, Soul of the Wild, so all of our non-token creatures will also be forests, which will be pumping up all of our creatures like Greensleeves. They'll be pumping up all of our stuff that is on the battlefield, including our Boo, and of course by making all creatures forests, when we blink those creatures, they will count as landfall triggers for us as well. And Ashaya also lets us dodge things that say blow up all non-land permanents. If an opponent happens to play something like, say, an Ondu Inversion or a Ruinous Ultimatum, then Ashaya will allow you to dodge those things. Also, if you add an Ashaya to the deck, I highly suggest adding in Oblivion Stone to the deck as well, because that gives you an 8-mana board wipe that Ashaya will protect you from, but will hose out everything from your opponents. And, well, that does it for the entirety of the deck. I hope you guys enjoyed. I know that I forgot to put this particular creature in the Nine Fingers Keen deck. The ability to drop tons and tons of really, really powerful creatures or really, really powerful lands onto the board was completely lost on me when I made that deck. So maybe when I go and do an upgrade version or a full power or a redux of Nine Fingers Keen, well, then we'll be able to see what we get out of that. That all said, if you have not considered already checking out my streams, please consider doing so. I also talk about current events over on the main channel. And if you want to support me financially, then there is a playmat available on my fourth wall, as well as supporting me directly on Patreon for behind the scenes on everything going on Shed's channel related. Finally, if you have not subscribed to this channel already, please consider doing so, and please consider checking me out over on Blue Sky. That all said, thank you for watching, and I hope every single one of you is having a wonderful day. As always, insert end of video tagline here. Hey, thanks for making it to the end of the video. I really could not do any of this without all of you. Those of you watching, and especially those of you who support me on Patreon. I wanted to go ahead and take a minute to thank all of you who do that, because with YouTube being what it is these days, I really cannot do this full time without the support from each and every one of you. Those people would be Red Joker, Purple Poundini, Jemshin, Briskreek, Jupe the Malignant, Michael, Ravalern, Mabbity Babbity, Astral Frontier, Tales of Atonement, Nixie Chan, Kiri Artemis, Victorian Alchemist, I'm not saying the last part of that, and you know that. Arcton Arclacier, Kiratorian, Dren Hadamata, Jordan M, John L, Lord Bleck, Smiling Game Master, and Fire Shard. Thank you so very much. But since you're here, why not go ahead and try watching another one? There should be one that's on the screen right now. And if you are a patron of mine, I wanted to go ahead and thank you again for all of your support. There is still a video you could press though, if you'd like. I would appreciate it just a little bit.